We walk around every single day completely aware of, like, the physical laws governing our world. If you drop a coffee cup on the sidewalk, gravity pulls it down. It
Right,
shatters.
you don't even have to think about it.
Exactly. It's just a fact of your environment. But then you step into a room, you say good morning to a coworker, or you get into a sudden, bizarre argument with your partner over where the car keys are.
Yeah, we've all been there.
Right. And suddenly you're operating under a set of laws that are entirely invisible.
It's funny you mention gravity, actually,
hmm
because while we think of our daily conversations as spontaneous or maybe just random noise, they're actually bound by physics-like vectors.
Wow, really?
Yeah, they're governed by forces just as rigid and predictable as gravity.
Uh-huh.
We just, we don't typically have the eyes to see the psychological mechanics flying back and forth.
Which is exactly what we are giving you today. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're giving you psychological X-ray vision.
I like the sound of that.
We are looking at the hidden architecture behind every single conversation, every argument, and like every passing greeting in your daily life. And we're drawing on Eric Berne's classic framework from his book, Games People Play.
It's such a foundational text.
It really is. And to
Yeah.
give you a shortcut to understanding the invisible structures of your own social interactions, we actually have to start with a concept that has an incredibly dark origin.
Yeah, it's a bit heavy, but it's crucial.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we aren't starting with small talk here. We are starting with literal survival and something called stimulus hunger.
That is the foundational concept, yes.
Yeah.
And it rests on some very sobering observations made on infants. Researchers, specifically a psychoanalyst named Renee Spitz, documented what happens when infants are deprived of physical handling.
Right, and this is where it gets really dark.
It does, because even if those infants are perfectly fed, kept clean, kept warm, if they are not held and stimulated, they will eventually sink into an irreversible decline.
Which is just heartbreaking.
It's devastating. They become prone to disease, they stop developing, and they can actually die. This condition is called emotional deprivation, but the physical consequences are absolute.
That is just so heavy. The idea that being held isn't just like a nice bonus for a baby. It is biologically required to keep the organism alive. I
Exactly.
mean, stimulus hunger has the exact same biological survival value as food hunger. But where it gets truly wild for me is the experiments done on infant rats to test the limits of this hunger.
What's fascinating here is the work of a researcher named S. Levine. He wanted to see exactly how different types of stimulation affected biological development.
So what did he do?
Well, he separated infant rats into groups. One group was gently handled every day, and as you might expect, their physical and mental development was fantastic.
Makes sense?
Yeah, even the biochemistry of their brains and their resistance to disease demonstrably improved compared to rats left in isolation. But here is the critical part. Levine subjected another group of rats to painful electric shocks.
Okay, and logically, anyone would think the short rats would decline, right? Or become stunted.
That is the intuitive assumption, absolutely. But they didn't. The shocked rats thrived just as much as the gently handled rats.
Wait, really?
Yes, both the handled rats and the shocked rats were far healthier and developed faster than the rats that were left completely alone in a void.
Wait, they shocked the rats and the rats did better. That completely flips everything I thought I knew about trauma and development on its head.
It's wild, isn't it?
So you're saying any interaction, even a genuinely painful one, is biologically better than no interaction at all?
That is the exact mechanism at play. The biological chain starts in the brainstem, specifically in a network called the reticular activating system.
Okay, the reticular activating system.
Right. And if that system isn't constantly stimulated by outside input, the nerve cells literally begin to degenerate. Neurological apathy sets in, which then leads to physical decline. So the biological mandate is crystal clear. The nervous system must have input to survive. The organism craves it just as much as it craves calories.
Which brings us to how this translates to you and me walking around the office or like the grocery store as adults, because obviously we aren't infants needing to be rocked all day.
Right, we aren't rats in a lab either.
Exactly. To explain this transition, there is this incredibly memorable, visceral phrase we came across in our research. It says, if you are not stroked, your spinal cord will shrivel up.
And we should probably define what a stroke means in this context,
Yeah, definitely.
because it is the fundamental unit of all social action. A stroke is simply any act that implies recognition of another person's presence.
So it's not always literal.
Well, when you are a vulnerable infant, a stroke is literal. It is a physical caress. It is being picked up. But as we grow up, Society forces us to compromise. I mean, you can't go around demanding to be physically held by your boss or your mailman.
Right. I like to think of it as an emotional diet. Just like we have a biological hunger for food, we have this intense, lingering childhood hunger for physical strokes.
That's a great way to put it.
But because of social norms and boundaries, we have to substitute. We compromise by accepting um, a nod across a hallway, a hello from a barista,
Mhm.
or a good job on a presentation in place of the physical handling we got as babies.
Yes, the substitution is key.
We're basically constantly snacking on these tiny social interactions just to keep our spinal cords from metaphorically shriveling up.
That emotional diet analogy works perfectly. The entire process of growing up is largely the process of learning how to substitute these subtle, symbolic forms of recognition for pure physical intimacy.
But the underlying hunger never actually goes away, does it?
Never. Every single day, your central subconscious objective is to secure enough of these strokes to maintain your psychological equilibrium.
So if we are all walking around hunting for strokes to survive, we need to understand how we do the hunting.
Ex-
And to do that, we have to look inward first. We
Mhm.
have to map out the cast of characters living inside our own heads that do all the negotiating.
This brings us to structural analysis. The core premise here is that you don't just have one single monolithic personality.
Right, you're not just one thing.
No, you actually have a limited repertoire of distinct ego states. And an ego state isn't just a mood or like a role you temporarily play. It is a coherent system of feelings accompanied by a very specific set of behavior patterns.
We are talking about the parent, the adult, and the child.
Yes, those three.
And I want to be very clear for everyone listening. These are actual psychological realities. When you shift into one of these states, it's not just your mindset changing.
Right, it's physical too.
Yeah, your posture, your vocabulary, the tightness in your vocal cords, literally everything changes to match that character.
Let's break down exactly what those three states are. First, the parent. This is sometimes called the extra-psychic state extero, meaning outside.
Okay, so the outside coming in.
Exactly. When you are in the parent ego state,
Yeah.
you are basically playing a tape recorder of the actual parental figures who raised you.
Oh, wow. So you might sit the exact way your dad sat.
Yes, or use the exact phrases your mom used when she was frustrated. It takes two forms. There's direct influence, which is do as I do, where you actually emulate them entirely.
And the other one?
Indirect influence, which is do as I say, where you adapt yourself to their strict rules. And the parent is incredibly useful, by the way.
It is. I usually think of that as a bad thing.
No, it handles all the routine matters automatically. It frees up your brain because you just do things the way they're done without having to compute every single decision.
Oh, that makes sense. Then there's the adult. The neo-psychic state, neo meaning new. This is essentially the present tense human computer, right?
That is a perfect way to look at it. The adult is your objective data processor. It is entirely non-prejudicial.
So it just looks at the facts.
Right. It appraises current reality, computes probabilities, and decides on actions necessary for your survival in the moment. Like when you cross a busy street, your adult is the one calculating the velocity of oncoming cars and your own walking speed.
It's cool, it's logical, and it's vital.
Exactly.
And finally, the child. The archaeopsychic state, archaeology, meaning relics from the past. These are fixated remnants from your own early childhood.
Yes, and this is crucial. When you are in this state, you aren't acting like a generic kid.
Right, you are being the literal boy or girl you once were.
Exactly. And this also takes two forms. There is the adapted child who modifies their behavior to please the parent, maybe by whining or pouting or being overly compliant.
And then there's the natural child.
Yes, which is pure spontaneous rebellion, joy, or creativity.
Now, I have to push back here for a second. Wait, aren't we supposed to be getting rid of our childish behaviors? I mean, isn't the whole point of personal growth, therapy, and life in general to just act like a rational adult all the time?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is crucial to reject the words childish and immature. Those words have a strong negative connotation. They imply a flaw that needs to be eradicated.
Okay, so what word should we use?
The text uses childlike because the child ego state is actually the most valuable part of the personality.
Really? The most valuable?
Yes,
Right.
it brings charm, pleasure, intuition, and creativity to an individual's life. A mature person isn't someone who has killed off their inner child.
Right, that sounds miserable.
It would be. A mature person is simply someone whose adult is in control most of the time, mediating safely between the parent and the child.
There's this memorable detail in our research about alcohol that illustrates this perfectly.
Oh, well, the alcohol example is brilliant.
Yeah, when someone becomes intoxicated, the alcohol actually decommissions the parent ego state
All
first.
right, the tape recorder shuts off.
Exactly. So all those rules, strictures, and voices telling you how things are done, they just vanish. That frees up the adapted child, and as you keep drinking, it eventually releases the natural child.
Which explains so much about party behavior.
It really does. It's exactly why people become so spontaneous, rebellious, or emotionally raw after a few drinks. The parent goes to sleep, the adult gets fuzzy, and the child is left to run the show.
That completely demystifies why our personalities seem to shift so dramatically under different conditions.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Now that we know who is inside us, this shifting trio of parent, adult, and child, what happens when my internal characters actually bump into your internal characters?
The math gets complicated fast.
It really does.
This is the realm of transactional analysis, the actual mechanics of conversation. A transaction is the basic unit of social intercourse.
So someone provides a transactional stimulus and the other person provides a transactional response.
Precisely.
And when things go right, we have what is called a complementary transaction.
Yes, a complementary transaction happens when the vectors between the two people are parallel.
Can you give an example of that?
Sure, let's say you are sick in bed, and you ask your partner for a glass of water. You are operating from the child ego state, looking for care.
Okay.
If your partner responds from the nurturing parent ego state and says, "Of course, let me get that for you, rest up," the vectors are perfectly aligned.
Child asks parent, parent responds to child.
Exactly. When transactions are complementary like this, communication flows smoothly. Theoretically, it can go on forever.
So like two adults solving a math problem together.
Or two parents gossiping critically about the neighbor's lawn. As long as the psychological lines don't cross, the conversation survives.
But the lines do cross.
They certainly do.
Think about the last time you asked your partner a simple question, like, I don't know, where the remote is, and they completely bit your head off.
Well,
You probably thought you did something horribly wrong.
but actually, your vectors just cross.
Right. What happens when an argument explodes out of nowhere?
That is the definition of a crossed transaction, and it is the root of the vast majority of our daily social difficulties.
Let's look at the classic example from the text.
Yes. Imagine a husband operating purely in his present tense, logical adult ego state, asking his wife an objective question.
He says, do you know where my cufflinks are?
Right. He is an adult looking for an adult response. He expects a simple data point, something like on the desk.
But the wife doesn't respond with her adult computer.
No, she doesn't.
She feels criticized, so she responds from her adapted child, and she targets his parent. She flares up and says, you're always blaming me for everything.
Look at the geometry of what just happened. The vectors have crossed.
The horizontal line just got smashed.
Exactly. The adult-to-adult horizontal line was suddenly intercepted by a diagonal child-to-parent line.
Yeah.
And here's the absolute rule of a cross transaction.
Communication breaks off immediately.
Yes, the conversation about the cufflinks is dead. It cannot continue until those psychological vectors are realigned.
So someone has to give in.
Right. Either the husband has to shift into his parent ego state to soothe or scold her child, or she has to shift back into her adult ego state to address the actual location of the cufflinks.
That is such a light bulb moment for anyone who has ever been in a relationship.
It explains so much.
Whenever a conversation derails instantly, it's almost never about the actual topic. It's because someone switched ego states and crossed the vectors.
Exactly.
But okay, those are simple interactions. People are saying what they mean, even if they're upset. But humans are incredibly complicated. Sometimes we say one thing, but we mean something entirely different.
Which leads us to the hidden layers of communication. Ulterior transactions.
This is where people start playing games with each other.
Yes, these are transactions that involve more than two ego states at the exact same time.
Okay, let me see if I can puzzle this one out. There is the angular transaction, which involves three ego states. Our sources set up this brilliant scene with a salesman.
It's a great example.
The salesman looks at a customer and says, this one is better, but you can't afford it. On the surface, what is that?
On the social level, the surface level, it looks like a standard adult-to-adult transaction. The salesman is just stating two objective facts about the product's quality and the customer's wallet.
Right, but psychologically, who is he actually talking to?
What do you think?
Wait, he's not talking to the adult. His adult is targeting the customer's inner child. He's throwing down a dare.
You hit the nail on the head. The salesman is manipulating the hidden vector. And if the customer isn't aware of their ego states, their child takes the bait.
The customer's child flares up and replies, "That's the one I'll take," just to prove the arrogant salesman wrong.
Exactly. The salesman wins the commission because he successfully triggered the child while maintaining the perfect cover of a rational adult conversation.
It's basically a conversation wearing a disguise.
That's exactly what it is.
And it gets even more complex with duplex transactions, which involve 4 ego states at once.
Duplex transactions are the classic structure of flirtation.
Oh, this one is fascinating.
Imagine a farmer or a cowboy says to a visitor, "Come and see the barn." And the visitor replies, "I've loved barns since I was a little girl."
On the surface, it's 2 adults having a very dry, objective conversation about agriculture.
Right.
But underneath, it is 2 natural children engaging in sex play. The adult words are just the socially acceptable cover for the child-to-child negotiation happening underneath.
Yes, and the fascinating part is, the child is the one who actually determines the outcome. The surface conversation is just a formality.
This raises an important question, though. Why do we go to all this trouble? Why the masks, the crossed vectors, and the disguised flirtations?
Because real intimacy, unscripted, genuine, emotionally open connection carries immense emotional risk. We are terrified of being vulnerable.
But we still need the strokes.
Exactly. Remember our biological mandate from the very beginning. We absolutely must have strokes to survive. We must avoid emotional starvation.
Okay, I track with you on how we hunt for these emotional strokes and why we hide behind ulterior motives to stay safe. But surely not every interaction is a hunt.
What do you mean?
Well, when I say hi to my mailman or when I'm filing spreadsheets at work, I'm not playing a psychological survival game, am I?
You actually are, just in a highly structured way.
Wait, really? Even spreadsheets?
Yes, because the eternal human problem is how to structure our waking hours to avoid boredom. And boredom is just another word for emotional starvation.
Oh, wow.
We have to structure our time to guarantee our stroke intake, and we use several options to do it. The most basic way is through procedures.
Right. Procedures are straightforward adult data processing. It's manipulating the material reality around you.
Like flying an airplane or doing your taxes.
Exactly.
And there's a brilliant example to distinguish how procedures work, comparing efficiency and effectiveness. Imagine a native assistant medical officer on a tropical island performing cataract surgeries. He uses all the medical knowledge he has with perfect efficiency. But a European medical officer, who had far more training, was originally more effective at getting results.
But something changes, right?
Yes. As the European aged and drank heavily, his hands began to shake. His efficiency dropped. Eventually, the native assistant surpassed him in effectiveness too.
Ah, I see.
A procedure is simply evaluated by 2 things: how perfectly the adult operates, which is efficiency, and the actual material results, which is effectiveness.
So what does this all mean? Procedures handle the material world. But when we get to the social world, how do we guarantee our strokes safely?
We use rituals. This creates what Berne calls the stroke economy.
And to me, this is the most mind-bending part of this entire deep dive.
It really changes how you see things.
Every simple greeting is actually a highly calculated transaction.
It truly operates like a ledger. An informal ritual, like saying hello to that mailman, is a stereotyped series of complementary transactions programmed by external social forces.
Let's look at casual acquaintances, Mr. A and Mr. B.
Right. They pass each other in the hall and exchange a simple 2-stroke ritual. Hi. Hi.
1 stroke given, 1 stroke received.
Exactly. The emotional equilibrium is maintained.
But the math gets so unbelievably specific. Let's say Mr. C and Mr. D work together. They usually do a 2-stroke hi-hi every single day.
Okay, standard ritual.
Then Mr. C goes on vacation for a month. While he's gone, the stroke debt accumulates. If Mr. D just says hi, when Mr. C gets back to the office, Mr. C is going to be incredibly offended.
Yes, he will.
Because subconsciously, without realizing it, they owe each other about 30 strokes.
And if Mr. D doesn't pay up, Mr. C feels that lack of strokes as literal biological panic, connecting right back to the infant survival drive we started with.
So what does Mr. D have to do?
He has to compress those 30 strokes into a rapid-fire interrogation to square the account. He has to say, "Where did you go? How was it? Looking fine. Glad you're back."
They rapid-fire exchange all these strokes, clear the debt, and then 2 days later, they are perfectly safe to go back to their standard 2-stroke hi-hi.
Exactly. The ledger is balanced.
But I have to ask, what if someone gives you too many strokes? What if you're expecting a standard two-stroke exchange? You say, hi, and the other person suddenly unloads, hi, how are you? Everything's great. Nice to see you. Warm enough for you. Love that shirt.
That breaks the rules of the local economy,
Mm.
and your adult ego state immediately gets suspicious.
You think, what's the matter with him?
Is he selling insurance? Does he need a favor? Because giving unearned strokes usually means an ulterior transaction is coming.
It's also calculated. It's like we are accountants of our own affection.
We really are.
And if we want to spend more time with people safely beyond just passing in the hallway, we move from rituals to pastimes.
Pastimes are those semi-ritualistic transactions arranged around a single field of material. You see them constantly at cocktail parties or family gatherings.
Oh, absolutely.
The primary object is to pass an interval of time safely while extracting the maximum number of strokes without getting too personal.
I recognize these immediately. You probably played one of these this past weekend without even realizing it.
Most people do.
There's the game of General Motors, where guys just stand by the grill and compare cars for an hour.
Very common.
There's Wardrobe, or the morning after, where everyone safely bonds by bragging about their hangovers. And my favorite example is PTA, because it shows how your ego states dictate the game.
Yes, PTA can be played at entirely different psychological levels.
How so?
Well, you can play it at the child-to-child level, complaining about recalcitrant husbands or demanding teachers, or you can play it at the adult-to-adult level, discussing the sociology of modern education.
So the topic doesn't even matter.
Right, the real purpose of a pastime isn't the topic itself. The pastime allows people to evaluate each other.
They're testing the waters.
Exactly. They are safely feeling out each other's ego states to see if they want to engage in deeper, more complex games with these people later, or maybe eventually risk actual intimacy.
So bringing this all together, this deep dive reveals that your daily life, which feels so incredibly spontaneous, random, and free-flowing, is actually a highly structured matrix.
By design.
You are constantly balancing your internal stroke economy. Your ego states, your parent, adult, and child are constantly shifting, taking the microphone, and negotiating behind the scenes.
Keeping the system running.
Every passing hello, every sudden argument about cufflinks, every safe conversation about a Ford truck at a barbecue has biological survival value. You are constantly fending off the void, trying to keep your nervous system stimulated.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it leads to a profound realization about human nature.
What's that?
We spend our lives executing procedures, trading ritualistic greetings to balance our stroke accounts, and engaging in pre-programmed pastimes at parties. All of this is masterfully designed to keep us safe.
Safe from what?
Safe from each other, really. It keeps the vectors parallel, and it helps us avoid the terrifying unpredictability of real human connection.
It's like we're constantly trying to defy that gravity we talked about at the beginning, holding all the fragile pieces of our psyche in midair with these invisible rules and disguises.
Which leaves us with this final thought. This raises an important question for you to mull over today.
Okay.
If all of our casual greetings are just calculated stroke economies, and our party conversations are just safe, pre-programmed pastimes designed to protect our inner child, what does it actually take to break the script?
Wow.
What would happen if, just for a day, you stopped playing the games, dropped the ulterior vectors, and actually risked completely unscripted, genuine intimacy?